why can't there be multiple gods that we can believe in? And why can't there be multiple ways into heaven?
Good. There can be. But you see, what you've got to answer, ma'am, is why would you believe in heaven? Have you ever been there? Neither have I. So in light of the fact you've never seen heaven, why would you as a thinking human being believe there's a heaven? But ma'am, my being convinced that I'm going to heaven is based on one thing: the trustworthiness of Jesus Christ. Because I've never been to heaven. So I don't know if there's a heaven or not from my experience. And I can promise you, Austin is not heaven. So you see, ma'am, when it comes to heaven, you're going to have to trust somebody the same way I'm going to have to trust somebody. And the question is, why do you trust whoever it is you trust? So because Muhammad contradicts Jesus, and because Jesus contradicts the avatars of Hinduism, and because the avatars of Hinduism contradict Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, and because they all contradict Baha'i faith, you've got to be on the intellectual level of a cockroach if you say they're all saying the same thing. They're not, ma'am. They're contradicting each other. So either they're all wrong or one of them's right. And now you got to study the Gospels for yourself, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you got to ask yourself, does the evidence point to Jesus being the truth? And if it does, trust him. But if the evidence is that Christ is a liar, you'd be a fool to trust him. Do not trust Jesus if the evidence is he's a fraud, he's a hypocrite, he's a liar. Don't trust him. But if the evidence is he's totally reliable, if the evidence is he really did die and rise from the dead, then you can trust him, and he's the one who promises heaven to everybody who puts their faith in him. A lot of my friends are atheists and agnostic, okay? And here's something that my atheist agnostic friends have to acknowledge if they're being intellectually consistent. Because they believe there's no heaven, no day of judgment, that has big implications for now, today. And the implication is what you and I do with our lives is ultimately meaningless. Why? Where are Hitler and Mother Teresa if there is no heaven and no hell? Where are Hitler and Mother Teresa? The same place. The fertilizer pit. They're decomposing. Which means, ultimately, it does not matter whether you are Adolf Hitler II or whether you're Mother Teresa II, because we're all going to the same place, the fertilizer pit. You see, Jesus says, no, there is eternity out there, and there's a heaven and a hell, and there's a day of judgment, which means the decisions that you make today are really significant. They really matter. And you are really valuable, because God wants you to live for eternity with him in heaven. And becoming fertilizer is not God's plan for you and desire for you.
How do you explain the existence of evil and suffering?
Very slowly, having to acknowledge I can't give you a complete answer. I do not know ultimately why God allowed evil, suffering, and death. But here's my first point. Well, remember, the atheist or agnostic says either there is no God or I don't know whether there's a God.
Yeah.
So good is not defined by God if you're an atheist.
Yeah.
If you're an atheist, good is defined by your culture or by the power elite or by yourself or by majority opinion. Sir, good is an intangible value. You cannot see good. But to understand goodness, there has to be a mind. This tree has no understanding of good. This cement has no understanding of good. See, good can't just exist, because goodness requires definition, and it's an intangible value that you can't measure. You can't grab goodness, which means you got to have a mind involved in defining what is good. Goodness demands some mind to define it. The tree, the cement, has no ability to understand goodness. You've got to have a mind that you cannot have goodness without some type of mind to create and define it. It's impossible. This does not define goodness. That does not define goodness. And that camera does not define goodness. And your glasses do not define goodness. Neither does your shirt, your pants, or your sneakers. You've got to have a mind to define goodness. Okay, but if this good God exists, why is there evil and suffering? It's real simple, sir. If an all-powerful God chooses to partially limit his power by giving you a free will, by giving me a free will, then if I go up to her, slap her in the face, and say, God made me do it, what am I? A liar. A total liar. God gave me a hand for a purpose, to respect this woman, to love this woman. But because I have a free will, I don't have to respect her, I don't have to love her, I can steal her backpack, I can smack her around, I can abuse her. And if anybody says, God made me do it, they are a liar. Flat out. So, why does evil exist? Evil exists because God limited his power. He's all powerful, but he limited his power by choosing to give her a free will, me a free will, all of us a free will. So, Genesis chapters 1 and 2. God creates a good world. God created this and God saw that it was good. God created that and God saw that it was good. God created this and God sees that it's good. So when God created, he did a good job. No evil. But Genesis chapter 3 records how human beings rebel against God. And one of the consequences of human beings telling God, get lost, get out of here, is God honors our free will, takes a step back from planet Earth, and nature unravels. And so you're absolutely correct, sir. Animals suffer. I have suffered. We all will suffer. Not because God is sicking us, but because God created a world with free will, people with free will. We chose him to tell him to get out. When he gets out,
so
chaos fills the gap. Genetic breakdown, death occur. If you're a husband and I smack you around, it might affect how you treat your wife when you go home tonight. It might affect how you treat your kids when you go home tonight. You see, for me to think that, well, I've got free will and it's just me and it's just you, and there are no consequences to the way I exercise my free will, it's a lie. Total lie. The same way, little babies that I have to bury didn't do anything wrong. But they're born into an unfair world where birth defects occur, and so babies die. Not because they've done something wrong. They have not done anything wrong. But they are born into an unfair, unjust, messed up world. So what on earth is original sin? Original sin is simply this. I am born with a readiness to sin factor. Doesn't mean that everything I do is evil. My atheist friends do a lot of good. They've got a conscience. But all of us have sinned. Every atheist, every agnostic, every Christian, Jew, Buddhist, Hindu, we all have sinned. Part of the reason we have sinned is because we're born with a readiness to sin factor. But we cannot blame our sinful nature for what we do, because we still have a free will. So if I slap her and you say, wait a second, Cliff, what'd you just do to her? Why'd you do it? And I say, because of my sinful nature. That's a cop-out, because I still have a will. And you see, here's the challenge. The challenge for me is to overcome my sinful nature with my will and make responsible decisions. And that's why the whole line of thinking at Texas State University, which is, I was born with this desire, therefore it's good, is a crock. I am convinced that my little granddaughter, who is 6 months old, his daughter, has no understanding of what good and evil are. But I am convinced that when she comes of age, and I think for different people that's different, she will develop her own understanding of good and evil. Will that understanding be heavily influenced by her environment? Yes, ma'am. Will her understanding of good and evil be limited by her environment? No. Once again, smack. Sorry you're getting hit so many times today. You ask me, Cliff, why'd you do it? And I say to you, because I grew up in an environment that taught me that women who wear this color sweatshirt deserve to be smacked. It doesn't cut it. Because although my environment taught me that, I still have a conscience, a rational mind, and I am responsible before God to exercise that and to contradict my culture, to contradict my environment when I begin to realize my environment is wrong. I played major college basketball. I was the worst guy on the team. I had good seats for every game. But I can promise you, almost, not everybody, but almost every guy who I played college basketball with had a very clear understanding of what human sexuality was all about. was all about getting as many good-looking women into bed with them as they could. So I had to exercise my conscience and my rational thinking. I had to ask, is that why God gave me my sexuality? To have sex with as many good-looking women as I can? And was it tempting to follow their example? I mean, that's the environment. I mean, shoot, we flew on a jet to played against UCLA, St. John's, NC State, Wake Forest. I mean, we were high flying. Okay, and so we all knew what we did at night. All right? So I had to make a decision. Is that the right way to live? Is that the right way to treat women? Is that the right way to express my sexuality? Or has God created my sexuality for a different reason? So I had to contradict my culture. And guess what? I've learned to respect people who contradict their culture and don't support racism. I work with some skinheads. And those skinheads grew up in a culture that said white superiority is clear. But there's some skinheads who said, no, it's wrong, and I'm not going to follow my culture. Yeah. So maybe Jesus did sin at some point. But I have to follow the evidence. And the evidence is the Apostle John lived closely with Christ for 3 years. And in 1 John, John writes, in him is no sin. So you're right, John didn't live with Jesus intimately for 33 years. Just for 3 years.
Yeah.
But I can promise you, if a dude lives with Jesus for 3 years and can honestly say, I've never seen the guy sin, that's pretty impressive. Then in John chapter 8, Jesus looked into the faces of his enemies and asked them, which one of you can prove me guilty of sin? And his enemies were silent. Whoa! I can promise you my enemies can point out many times that I have sinned. Now remember, you can't believe in God simply because you believe in God. You believe in God because there's evidence. A lot of it's common sense. But remember, we're starting off then with defining faith. You don't believe in God simply because you believe. No. You believe in God because there's evidence that God exists, right?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Now just do the same thing with Jesus. Read the Gospels, and yes, it's going to be different. The evidence that God exists is not historical. It's philosophical.
Right.
You see order and design, points to a designer. You see a moral absolute, an objective moral, points to a moral lawgiver. Okay, you've got your evidence. Now, when it comes to Jesus, it's not going to be philosophical. Why? Because he claimed to be God in human form. But I like that, because that means we can historically analyze Christ. Which is why Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15, if Jesus Christ is not risen from the dead, we're idiots for believing in him. Because the veracity, the truthfulness of Christ is based on his claim, I'm going to die and rise from the dead. Oh, that was a big mistake, Jesus. What's the mistake? You gave us a way to verify you or falsify you. If you don't rise from the dead, you, Jesus, are a liar. But if you did rise from the dead, you, Jesus, are the truth.